Hi, good people. First, I want to thank all my subscribers and those taking time to like my videos. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for taking time to support me. Whoa, the gift that keeps giving. Watch one among so many trading videos about P. Diddy. Watch this video.
I always believed that the world of celebrities was all about luxury and glamour until I discovered what happens behind the curtain. My name is Ethan. For years, I worked behind the scenes in a world that many consider the center of the universe. The glitter, the celebrities, the parties, everything seemed perfect, like a dream anyone would want to live. But dreams have a price, and some quickly turn into nightmares. What I'm going to tell you started with an invitation. Not an ordinary invitation, but one that should never have been accepted. It was a sultry night when I received the message. The unknown number flashed on my cell phone screen. Meet me at the attached address. Don't tell anyone. My first reaction was to hesitate. But working for giants like Diddy and Jay-Z taught me that certain invitations are not asked. They are obligations. The address took me to a building that seemed lost in time, hidden in downtown Los Angeles. On the outside, he was so insignificant that he seemed invisible. But inside, the air had weight. A spiral staircase led underground, each step echoing like a warning. Upon reaching the lower floor, I was greeted by a man whose presence was as uncomfortable as his surroundings. His face was hidden by shadows, but his voice was sharp. They want you to see. Without further explanation, he opened the door to what I can only describe as a tangible nightmare. The room was cold, as if the air itself had stopped circulating. In the center, a table full of yellowed and worn documents. But that wasn't what made me hold my breath. That's what was on the walls. Projected photos, videos paused in disturbing frames, and faces I instantly recognized. Jaguar Wright stood among them, in a corner of the room, frozen in an image that seemed to tell a story in itself. Beside him, photos of Jay-Z and Beyoncé, intimate moments that should never have been recorded. Other familiar faces appeared and disappeared from the projections, each carrying a weight that made me want to run away. As I took in the scene, the lights went out except for a single spotlight that illuminated the center of the room. On the table, a videotape seemed to glow. Before I could react, a voice echoed, "Take this, and never mention this place." My hands shook as I held the small object, feeling like I was carrying something that could change my life forever. When I left that place, a single question was pounding in my mind. Why did they want me to see this? After that night, every step I took felt heavier. Sleeping became impossible. That tape, stored in my backpack, seemed to weigh tons. Curiosity gnawed at me, but something deeper, a survival instinct perhaps, screamed at me to leave it where it was. But in my work, curiosity is not a choice. It's a curse. That's how, in the dead of night, I ended up in the studio. Working for giants like Diddy and Jay-Z made the studio almost an extension of my life. But that night, something was off. The silence was deafening, filled with an unsettling whisper that seemed to echo off the walls. The main room, always bright, was now shrouded in shadow, as if the spotlights themselves had decided to erase part of the truth. With the tape in hand, I decided I needed answers. I went to the editing room, a cramped cubicle that always felt colder than the rest of the studio. It was a place where truths were manipulated before being released into the world. Inserting the tape into the equipment, I felt a shiver run up my spine. When the screen lit up, the images were clear and disturbing. They showed a party, but not just anyone. It was one of Diddy's infamous private meetings, the ones they always talked about in whispers in the hallways. Among the guests, I spotted Jaguar Wright in the background, talking to someone I didn't recognize. The camera focused on Jay-Z, whose gaze betrayed something deeper, perhaps regret, perhaps fear. He looked like a man out of place, lost in a place he didn't want to be. Suddenly, the footage changed. The camera now followed a narrow, dimly lit hallway. Hooded figures walked slowly, and the sound of whispered voices that had previously echoed through the studio seemed to come directly from the recording. The tension was unbearable. Then a scream rang out, so loud and real that my heart skipped a beat and my chair almost tipped back. The screen went black and a single sentence appeared in sharp white letters. Some things are not meant to be seen. I turned everything off immediately, panic taking over me. When I left the editing room, the studio seemed even colder, the shadows thicker. But the worst thing was the sound, the whispers. They weren't on the recording anymore. Now they echoed in my mind. I knew this was just the beginning. What I had seen was a fraction of something much larger, a fragment of a puzzle that should never exist. But before he could process it, the final blow came. The tape disappeared, so without a trace, as if it had never existed. It was then that I realized the true power of the forces behind it all. People like Diddy and Jay-Z were untouchable, protected by a system that crushed any attempt at exposure. But for how long? We live in a world where the structures that surround us can collapse at any moment. There are forces at work that we don't even understand, and ignoring them only makes us more vulnerable. If you too feel like there is something wrong in the world, something that threatens everything we know, I have something special for you. In the pinned comments is a gift. Global Collapse. It's more than a guide. It's a key to understanding what lies ahead. Don't miss this opportunity before it's too late. The next morning, when I entered the studio, a strange heaviness hung in the air, the kind of weight you only notice when something is about to go terribly wrong. The tape I had watched the night before was gone. For a moment, I thought I might have left it somewhere else or forgotten it in the chaos of the night before. But it soon became clear. This was no simple oversight. Someone knew what I had found, and that someone was determined to erase any evidence. Still reluctant, I decided to investigate. Accessing the studio's servers, I started looking through the digital files. Amid hidden folders and enigmatic names, I found something that froze my breath. Jaguar Wright. His name was on reports and references that pointed down the same dark path I was beginning to explore. For years, Jaguar was an uncomfortable figure for the music elite, accusing Diddy and Jay-Z of monstrous practices and shadowy alliances. Many called her paranoid, but now, with the data in front of me, I knew there was more truth to her words than anyone realized. As I delved into the archives, the pieces began to fall into place. Documents mentioned exclusive parties that connected R. Kelly to Aaliyah, events masquerading as celebrations but hiding disturbing secrets. Jay-Z also appeared in the reports, his name linked to meetings and transactions that made even the most extreme suspicions seem plausible. It was as if my every click was pulling a thread that threatened to dismantle the entire fabric of the music industry. Then it happened. The computer screen went dark, replaced by a message in cold white letters. "You're going too far, Ethan." Panic took over. I knew I was being watched, but now the threat was real. I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Two men entered the room, both with the posture of someone who knew exactly why they were there. "We need to make sure he doesn't talk to anyone," one of them said, without hesitation. They knew my name, my routine, and apparently much more. With my heart racing, I watched helplessly as they erased all traces of the server. When they emerged, the air was so thick it seemed impossible to breathe. At that moment, I understood the extent of what I was facing. It wasn't just a group of powerful people. It was a well-oiled machine created to protect monsters and crush anyone who dared challenge its control. With the tape gone and my every step monitored, I realized I was in uncharted territory. My answers could not be found in archives or recordings. They were hidden in a place few would dare visit, where the darkest secrets were reflected to those brave enough to face them. The corridor of reflections. They say the truth is always in front of you, but we don't always have the courage to face it. I never believed in that idea until that moment. The place was known as the Corridor of Reflections, hidden underground behind. A door with a code that only a privileged few knew, only those who had something to hide or something to protect. I knew I was risking everything by going in there, but I also knew that the answers I was looking for were waiting for me. As soon as I passed through the entrance, I was swallowed by an unsettling silence. It was no ordinary silence. It was the kind that seemed to breathe, alive, waiting for you to make the slightest mistake. The hallway walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors, reflecting my every movement in a distorted way. The light was dim and uneven, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to extend beyond the reflection. Each step sounded like an infinite echo, as if the hallway itself was amplifying my presence. In the center of the hallway, a glass table held a working laptop. On the screen, a single folder flashed with the title, Dangerous Connections. I took a deep breath and clicked. What I saw next made my stomach turn. There were the names of Jay-Z, Diddy, R. Kelly, and Aaliyah, accompanied by a series of photos, videos, and contracts. These documents not only confirmed dark rumors, but detailed them irrefutably. The parties, the deals, and the victims. It was all there, with visual evidence that would make anyone question the morality of the industry. Jaguar Wright wasn't wrong. Her accusations against Jay-Z and Diddy were more than bold allegations. They were accurate descriptions of a system that consumed lives to sustain power. One of the videos showed R. Kelly alongside Aaliyah, with the date marking a period when she was underage. Another file insinuated that Beyoncé, even indirectly, was by Jay-Z's side in several of these situations. Was she a silent victim or an unwilling accomplice? Questions hovered in my mind, leaving me feeling helpless. Suddenly, a reflection moved in the mirror. My heart raced. I turned around quickly, but the hallway was empty. As I focused on the reflection, I realized I was not alone. The security guard I had seen before was standing at the entrance, staring at me with cold eyes. "You went too far, Ethan," he said, pulling out a radio with a steady hand. Before he could do anything, the lighting in the hallway flickered violently, plunging everything into darkness for a few seconds. When the lights came back on, the security guard was gone, as was the laptop. I was left alone, staring at my reflection. But what I saw wasn't just my face. On the other side of the mirror, I could have sworn I saw the victims' faces, fragmented, distorted, but painfully real. They looked at me as if begging me not to give up, so that I wouldn't be silent. What I saw in the Hall of Reflections changed me. It was no longer about dark secrets. It was about the brutal price we pay for ignoring them. Every face I saw, victims, accomplices, seemed to ask, "How far have you? Are you willing to go, Ethan?" I knew the only person who could help me was Jaguar Wright. And for the first time, I felt the weight of facing a truth that was perhaps more than I could bear. Sometimes a person's silence is more deafening than any scream. That's how I felt when I met Jaguar Wright for the first time. It wasn't on a TV show, nor in an explosive interview, but in a secluded location, which I can only describe as a refuge, or perhaps a hiding place. She sat in a worn wooden chair, staring at a fixed point on the wall, as if the weight of the stories she carried were carved around her. I knew who she was before I even walked in there. Everyone knew Jaguar was the woman who challenged titans like Diddy and Jay-Z, exposing the underbelly of an industry that thrived on silence and power. But seeing her in person, I realized she was more than a controversial figure. She was a survivor, someone who bore the scars of battles few dared to face. I asked her why she kept talking, even though she knew that with each word, she increased the risks for herself. She sighed, her voice sounding like a melancholy melody, because someone needs to tell what really happens. Diddy, Jay-Z, they think they're untouchable. But monsters don't live forever. They fall. They all fall. As we talked, Jaguar revealed to me a piece of her memory that seemed to have haunted her for years. A party, but not like the ones we see on magazine covers. This was different, dark. Inside a room, she saw a young woman, broken inside, in her words, being led by 2 security guards to a locked room. I knew what was going to happen, Ethan, she said, her voice almost breaking. And you know what's worse? Everyone there knew too, but no one did anything. She mentioned the names with a coolness that gave me goosebumps. Diddy, Jay-Z, even Beyonce. They know everything. Some participate, others just watch, but no one is innocent in this game. In the corner of the room where we stood, a pile of papers and a worn-out laptop caught my eye. Jaguar pointed at them and said, "They want you to think it's a secret, but it's a conspiracy in plain sight. It's all there, Ethan. They've created an empire over bodies and silences." When I asked if she believed the truth would one day be exposed, Jaguar let out a bitter laugh. "The truth is already out there, Ethan, but no one wants to look. The question is not whether it will be exposed. The question is, will you face it or continue to pretend you didn't see it?" I left that place with a lump in my throat and more questions than answers. Jaguar Wright wasn't just a brave voice. She was a witness to horrors I was still beginning to understand. What if she was right? If the monsters really weren't live forever? Then the worst was yet to come. What I needed to find out now was how far the truth could go before it was swallowed up again by silence. That night, an anonymous message arrived on my phone. Just an address, a time, and a veiled promise. The time has come to know the truth. My instinct told me to ignore it, but the need for answers was stronger than the fear. The destination was an abandoned church, a building that had long lost any trace of sanctity. Graffiti covered the outer walls, and the shattered windows reflected moonlight, like empty eyes watching my arrival. The creaking of the wooden floor beneath my feet echoed in the shadowy space, creating a haunting soundtrack for what was to come. Upon entering the main nave, I was greeted by a spectacle that seemed like something out of a nightmare. Hooded figures stood in a circle around a makeshift altar where black candles flickered with an eerie light. Diddy was there, dressed in ritualistic fashion, his hands tracing precise movements as if he were commanding an invisible symphony. The air was almost unbreathable, heavy with incense and a metallic smell that stuck in your throat. In the background, a hypnotic melody filled the space, each note seeming to vibrate with a power that defied reason. The feeling was suffocating, as if the church itself was alive and conspiring against me. Among the hooded men, I recognized Jaguar Wright. His eyes fixed on the altar carried a contained fury, as if he knew something that I didn't. I didn't dare call out to her, but her gaze met mine for a brief moment. And then, something changed. One of the hooded men approached the altar, carrying an ancient wooden box. When the lid was opened, the room was plunged into an eerie silence. I couldn't see what was inside, but the impact was immediate. The hooded men bowed, their heads in reverence, while fear marked their movements. Suddenly, a barely audible voice echoed next to me. Jaguar era. He did the same with Jay-Z. They all have a price. Are you ready to pay yours? Before I could react, she disappeared into the darkness. Diddy, still at the altar, slowly turned around and his eyes met mine. It was as if he knew I was there the whole time. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone who sees it has a role to play. That night showed me something I wasn't prepared to face. What happens when power surpasses all barriers of morality? How far will these figures go to protect their kingdoms? And the most terrifying thing, what role did they have in store for me? I knew the moment had arrived. Running away was no longer an option. If I wanted answers, I needed to face the men at the center of it all, even if it meant putting myself directly in the line of fire. The meeting was arranged on the top floor of a skyscraper in the heart of the city, a monument to power and opulence. Each floor the elevator went up seemed to increase the weight on my mind, as if the building itself was trying to crush me. When the doors opened, I was greeted by a large, cold room where luxury could not mask the oppressive atmosphere. Jay-Z was in the back of the room, standing, his imposing silhouette silhouetted against the illuminated city. Beside him, sitting casually in a leather armchair, was Diddy, holding a glass of whiskey. The silence in the room was palpable, broken only by the sound of my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The tension was suffocating. Jay-Z crossed his arms, his eyes fixed on me, evaluating my every move. Diddy, on the other hand, looked relaxed, but there was something predatory about the smile he wore. Jaguar Wright had warned me about moments like this. "They want to test your limits," she had said. "They want to know how far you're willing to go." These words echoed in my mind as I tried to stand my ground in the face of the two titans of the industry. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan," Jay-Z said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was low, controlled, but charged with authority. "Do you think you can tear down everything we've built with fragments of truths you don't even understand?" Diddy laughed softly, the sound thick with disdain. "Let me guess," he said. "Jaguar Wright has convinced you that you can be a hero, that you know something? Listen carefully. You don't even know the half of what's really going on." He picked up a folder on the table and slowly opened it, revealing photos and documents that immediately chilled my blood. They were images of me, of places I had been, people I had spoken to. "We know everything about you," Diddy continued, his voice now cold and cutting. But it was Jay-Z who delivered the final blow. He slid a photo across the table. As I looked, I felt my heart sink. It was someone I loved, someone I would never put at risk. He looked straight at me and said, "If you continue, it won't just be you who pays the price. Choose wisely." How far can power go to protect its secrets? And what happens to those who dare to challenge him? As the elevator doors closed, leaving that confrontation behind, something inside me changed. I knew there was no going back. My choices would be dangerous, but one thing was clear. Even if it cost everything, I would not be silenced. Sometimes running away is not cowardice, it's survival. When I left that building, it wasn't just a physical movement. It was the beginning of a journey of no return, a battle against a system much bigger than I could ever imagine. As I drove through the deserted city, my hands shook on the steering wheel. Every car behind me felt like a threat. Every corner a possible ambush point. I knew they were watching. Diddy, Jay-Z, and maybe others whose names I didn't even know yet. Jaguar Wright's words echoed in my mind. "They have eyes everywhere, but you can still escape if you know where to look." The rain began to fall, the drops hitting the windshield like an incessant drumming. The shadows cast by the streetlights seemed alive, distorted, following me. My destiny A refuge, a place Jaguar had mentioned, an isolated cabin in the middle of a forest off the radar. When I arrived, I was greeted by an elderly man with tired eyes and steady hands. "You're in the right place," he said, his voice heavy with gravity. "But getting here means you can never go back to your old life." Inside the cabin, the heat from the fireplace couldn't dispel the cold he felt in his chest. He explained that many others had tried to expose the truth before me, but few had survived. "You have something powerful," he said. "They will do everything they can to make sure this never reaches the public." That night, as we were planning our next steps, the sound of branches breaking outside made me freeze. The old man took a gun and went to check. We didn't find anyone, but something told me we weren't alone. In the days that followed, I received anonymous messages. One of them held the promise of even more damning evidence about Diddy, Jay-Z, and the intricate network that supported the industry's empire. But before I could meet with this person, he disappeared. On the last night in the cabin, a flash drive mysteriously appeared on the porch. Inside were files that could dismantle everything these powerful figures had built. However, exposing that meant condemning myself. Standing, looking at the starry sky, I asked myself, what does freedom really mean?
I hope you watched the video from beginning to the end. It's important. Please remember to subscribe, share, and like. Thank you.